And we are live. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? So, tonight, what we have on board is we are reacting to Dr. Alex Tatum's viral anabolic tier list. He's going over 10, 12, 14, 15 different compounds, and from there, we're going to be reacting to them, figuring out what I think about his placement, what I think is best for climbing, and really just getting into which ones I agree, which ones I disagree with. And I also really appreciate Dr. Alex. He was gracious enough to let us make this tier list. So if you're new, please hop in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let's jump into it.
Arguing about which of your favorite compounds will give you the most gains and kill you the slowest. What's up, guys? My name is Dr. Alex, and today we're going to be talking about some of the most popular anabolic compounds, whether it's testosterone, nandrolone, winstrol, you name it. These are the compounds that are most commonly mentioned in the framework of bodybuilding, strength, strongman, and generally everyone that's trying to make a name for
Definitely finding things that are healthier that'll kill us the slowest is 100% the move. I cannot emphasize enough that safety is just the right call. So let's figure out how that's going to go. You guys kind of know already that I tend to lean more towards safety and sustainability. So let's figure out, of the stuff that he likes, what about the toxic compounds that might be useful for us? What about the not so toxic compounds? And, you know, unlike me, Dr. Alex is a certified urologist and is a medical doctor. Whereas I am a guy that loves to do steroids and research steroids. So let's take a look.
For themselves on TikTok. And so what we're going to try and do today is to have a nuanced and thorough discussion of each of these compounds. What is their history? What is their structure? How do they work? What is some interesting facts about them? What are the benefits? And then also, what are the risks? And then we're going to put all that together and then give them a grade. We're going to put them on our steroid tier list. Now, this is not your tier list. This is my tier list. So if you have a strong opinion about any...
He's absolutely right. This is my tier list. So I'm definitely going to be pushing back on things that I disagree with. But let's take a look and see what he has to say.
These compounds, don't keep it to yourself. Shout out in the comments down below. We want to hear from you. And again, this is not saying that one compound is necessarily stronger than the other, and that's why it gets a higher rating. This is about how effective are these compounds overall for their given indication, for their given purpose. And so, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's dive into it.
All right, so if he's setting the standard on what's the best for its effective purpose, I'm going to use that same rubric. So if there are things that are better for acquiring strength that I might, versus things that might be better for peaking for a climb, we can sort of grade those accordingly and use that within our rubric.
All right, so let's talk about the rules.
Oh yeah, don't do steroids, obviously.
Originally, I thought we could get something like a fishbowl and randomly just pull names out of a hat or something like that, and that just didn't seem right. So instead, we have an empty box of protein bars from Gorilla Mind. No, we're not sponsored by them, but if someone wants to, just hit me up because my video guy is expensive. So we are going to draw a compound out of the box of protein, and we're going to look at it, and then we're going to talk about...
We're definitely going Built Bars on this one.
Risks,
Absolutely
benefits,
delicious.
interesting facts, and put it on the tier list. So, without further ado, let's get started. Our first compound, MK677. I think it's hilarious that I'm talking about all these classic anabolics, and the first thing I pick up is like the latest craze on TikTok. But I wanted to include MK677 in here because I actually really, really like MK for its specific application. So,
spoiler alert, I do not like MK for its specific application. The thing that he's going to like the most about this is going to be the reason that I hate this compound the most. But I understand why Dr. Alex likes it. You're going to understand immediately why I can't stand it. Let's hear what he has to say.
First off, what is MK677? Also known as ibutamorin, MK677 is a ghrelin receptor agonist, and it's actually the only one that's orally available, which means that it's available as a capsule, or sometimes you'll see it sold in like a little dropper and you put drops in your mouth, because you know that's super scientific for dosing. And the benefit of MK677 is, in addition to boosting growth hormone, which most ghrelin receptors that are on the market, that's the whole idea, that you can stimulate natural growth hormone release as opposed to dosing yourself with actual, growth itself, is that this stimulates hunger pretty significantly, but in a way that is relatively tolerable. And so
great. A compound that'll make us more hungry and give us GH. So, like, hooray. He's going to get into some of the side effects probably sooner rather than later. But, when we're considering being on the wall, being hungry and gaining weight, that's a thing that we're psyched about. And, like, yeah, but let's hear more.
So what I mean by that is that if we're looking at all the different ghrelin receptor agonists, we're looking at something like ipamorelin, which has to be injected. It's a very mild appetite stimulant. Or we go to something more significant like GHRP6, which is just intense. Like, you might as well have like an entire box of Oreos next to you, otherwise you're going to faint and fall out.
Sounds good. That actually sounds like my dream compound.
This is, for most people, a compound that will stimulate hunger over a prolonged period of time in a way that's a little bit more steady, which can actually really assist with calorie consumption. And that's something that resonates with me. I've taken MK when it was prescribed to me back whenever you could actually get MK, prescribed and compounded by a legit compounding pharmacy. And, what I noticed is that for me, it made all the difference when it came to actually consuming enough calories in order to put on size, because I don't care, what you're doing, whether you're natural, whether you're enhanced, if you don't eat enough protein, if you don't eat enough food, you will not grow and you will not progress.
So he's actually making a pretty fair point there. So I do talk to a lot of climbers that consider themselves hard gainers that have an inability to eat enough protein to put on size. And they want to. Most of these guys are natural. Most of these guys... And could you benefit from the increased GH secretion? Yeah, you totally could. If you have an inability to eat and you've never eaten like a bodybuilder before and you want to put on size, could you potentially run MK just so that you could get used to eating like this? Yeah, that's a benign enough thing. You could do that. That'd probably be an okay use. Do I think that would be the best mechanism for driving your hunger? Like, honestly, if you're using growth hormone or test, I think that alone should probably be driving your size versus the MK. But, like, I would never recommend this for a pro climber. But if you're an amateur and you really want to take it because you have that much trouble eating, I guess you could if you're in that niche case.
Because your body, it needs building blocks in order to move forward. So, with all that being said, it's time to rank MK677, all right? And we have to take in this a couple things into consideration, right? We talked about the benefit of the growth hormone release. We've got the benefit of the appetite stimulation, right? But we also have some drawbacks, right? MK can have some significant water retention, all right? You're going to look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man if you try to stay on this stuff too long, especially if you're running other compounds that are going to increase water retention. So you've got that drawback to worry about. And also, it doesn't last forever. You're only going to get that appetite stimulation for maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So, it's time to rank this. It doesn't have, you don't have to worry about test suppression. That's a really positive thing.
Yeah, not suppressing test is fine. If you're going to get the same edema that you get with growth hormone, I'm obviously going to tell you to just take the growth hormone, A, because you're going to get more out of it, and B, because it's not going to, make you ravenous and starving. MK will raise your appetite, obviously. That's why he's talking about it. GH will make you leaner. Even on, 1.5 IUs of GH, you will get leaner, which is awesome. If you're going to take something that's going to give you edema, take growth hormone or, CJC 1295. But, get ready for a violent disagreement right now.
Yeah, I would say this. Honestly, if you're someone who is, let's say, a hard gainer, or you're someone where it really struggles to put on size, I got to say, MK677, this is S tier, man.
wrong for climbing. I think it's D tier. I think it has a niche use case, but by and large, you would never catch me dead recommending this to literally anybody. So, like, again, if you're a hard gainer and you want to try something like this out to just get yourself to eat more, fine. But, like, if you're gonna play around with performance-enhancing drugs, this is probably one of the worst ways as a climber to generate growth hormone. So, like, wildly disagree.
Had this huge rivalry with space when it comes to history.
Let's talk to a Turinabol.
When the Cold War was peaking, and we had this huge rivalry between the United States and the Soviets, we competed in every other way except for the actual battlefield. That's why it's called the Cold War. And Olympics and competitive athletics was it. Like, all eyes were on this. Whether it was this, it was the space race, a couple of other things. And as a result, the Soviets, in a very competitive move, developed an entire doping program called the East German Doping Program that was completely centered around doping the ever-living crap out of their athletes so that they could...
They broke so many records on Turinabol. I can't even express this enough. I think both, like, weightlifting and track athletes just started smashing record after record on T-ball. It's definitely a compound that was specifically made for athletes, which is really nifty because most of the compounds are sort of made for cachexia or for just being in states of, like, deep caloric restriction. So this is pretty cool.
Run farther, lift more, jump higher than their American counterparts. And Turinabol was that original compound. That was the one that was used more than anything else. And what was attractive about T-ball is that it was orally available, and it really wasn't that androgenic. All right, so they were able to give it, at least in smaller doses, to their female athletes in addition to their male athletes.
Don't take Turinabol as a female. They definitely virilized a bunch of women in the process. This is not a female-safe compound. I'm going to say that a lot.
The thing that's interesting about T-ball is that it has really significant strength gains that are associated with it, but it doesn't have the same sort of fluid retention that you get from D-ball because it doesn't aromatize the same way. D-ball will get these weird estrogens that will come off of it, and then you end up holding onto a bunch of fluid in the subcutaneous space. The test deck of D-ball stack that everybody talks about, where you put on all this strength and size, and what you don't realize is that half of that size is just like buckets of water that you're just.
And he's right. Essentially, because it's a methylated form of Dianabol. It basically hits the liver and tends to, like, really anything that you run into the liver, it's going to be more anabolic and at least more potent than its injectable counterpart. But you're going to trade off for that toxicity, or you're going to trade off for that, like, boost in anabolism and strength drive with toxicity. So whenever you go through the liver, you're going to make, it's going to be harder on your lipids more often than not. It's going to be harder on your liver more often than not. And that's sort of the trade-off that you make. But if your goal is to drive strength, and, like, for both finger strength and for ballistic strength, if you're doing, like, a lot of dynos, I think Turinabol absolutely has its place as an oral. The other reason that I tend to like orals a lot is because you're sort of capped on how much you can take from the toxicity, and it does give, like, immediate strength boosts. I think that that's actually pretty prime for climbers because you're not going to be able to drive as much tissue, but you will be able to drive your performance a lot, and the stimulus that you're able to drive is really potent. So I could imagine if I were doing this for a strength acquisition cycle, pairing this with something like a growth hormone could be really beneficial, so that you could get the stimulus into your fingers and then leverage the growth hormone for the collagen synthesis. I think that would be super dope. Obviously, you could drop the growth entirely and use this for a peak for a project, and that could be really helpful. If you're going to go to a font and go on a dyno rampage, I think that makes all the sense in the world. Yeah, I haven't tried Turinabol, but, like, it's on my short list of things to try, so I'm really curious to see what he has to say.
Just carrying around yourself, you can't button up your shirt, it's a super attractive look. T-ball doesn't have that, and so that is one of the greatest strengths of it. But the drawback is that, like,
and he's right, the lack of bloat also great.
All androgens, it will suppress your natural test axis, all right? And also, it's an orally available 17-alpha alkylated steroid. So this is going to play hell with your liver, like almost all oral steroids. There's nothing special about it in that regard. But it is a really fascinating compound with some fascinating history, and even today is a favorite pick for a lot of athletes, especially athletes in powerlifting and athletes in strongman who are looking to, again, add strength, all right, but they don't want to add on, the huge amount of water weight, right? Like, I mean,
That's us. That's literally our population. This fits us like a glove.
Brian Shaw, fantastically handsome guy, but not everybody wants to look like they're a tomato about to pop. So we're going to go ahead, and for T-ball, I think I feel pretty confident putting this right in A tier of.
And I agree. I think Toronto ball absolutely belongs in A tier. You could use it in short periods for peaking. You could use it in short periods for strength training and strength acquisition. I think this has a lot of upside as an anabolic. I think its only downside is its toxicity. If this was safer, this could easily be an S tier compound, apart from the fact that it's kind of hard to find.
Oral steroids. And moving on. All right. So next we've got equipoise. Whoa, Nelly. So equipoise is an interesting compound because it is more anabolic than testosterone, but it is not quite as anabolic as, let's say, a 19-nor. So, for example, like nandrolone or trestolone or tren. Equipoise kind of sits in this space where it is commonly used to try and add on more size onto an athlete over a longer period of time. Think more dry gains, okay, that are going to be not quite as dry. You're not going for that shredded look of Primabol, and this is something that you're going to run whenever you are in more of a bulking phase. But it's something that can be added into in addition to testosterone to try and add both strength and size on somebody in a very more reasonable fashion, at least.
So essentially, the way that we would look at EQ is in a couple different ways, right? The first is you could pair it along with testosterone. So you won't really just want to run testosterone up and up and up and up and up because your estradiol is going to get too high. You're going to need something to manage it. So your options are Primobolan or equipoise, or you could also use Masteron as like that secondary anabolic to drive more size. So if you were trying to put on a little bit of size and a little bit of strength, it would make a lot of sense to, rather than just ramping up your testosterone, you could leave your test at 150 or 200 milligrams and throw in a little bit of equipoise. And you could use that to manage the estrogen while still adding more androgens to drive the strength and size that you're looking for. And, you know, as long as your blood markers are good, you could realistically run this for 12, 16, 20, 28 weeks until you get the size and strength that you're looking for.
That is the reputation. One thing I really like about equipoise is because we always talk about how bodybuilders are injecting themselves with horse steroids, and that comes from this. This is the horse steroid that was originally developed for racing horses. That
True.
You can now find at your local gym. Maybe not your local gym, maybe just my local gym, but certainly you can find it in the locker of every single TikTok influencer trying to sell you watered down peptides. So equipoise.
He's right. By the way, so believe it or not, I have seen EQ deployed not so much for bouldering or for sport climbing, but in alpine climbing. So of all of so really most anabolics are going to drive your red blood cell count. Testosterone will do this. Masteron won't drive red blood cell count, but I believe Primobolan and equipoise certainly do. Nandrolone and Trenbolone absolutely do. So what's neat about this is if you're an alpine climber and you've got to deal with some high elevation stuff, EQ makes a lot of sense. I know a coach that put an alpine climber on EQ and Anadrol for an Everest summit and used the added red blood cell count so that he didn't have to worry and lean on the other compounds to leverage oxygen at high altitude. So it's been used before, which is certainly like super cool.
Equipoise, a solid anabolic choice, has the drawbacks of EQ anxiety, where people will get extremely stressed and very anxious in their own heads while running equipoise, especially for a longer period of time. And I will tell you that equipoise will raise your hematocrit faster than almost any other compound, in addition to raising your blood pressure. And so I think that it does have some drawbacks. And again, while it is a little bit more anabolic than just pure testosterone, it also has some drawbacks associated with that. So I'm going to give equipoise a solid B tier.
I kind of agree. I like EQ as a secondary compound. I like it for raising blood cells. I think it's a fine compound that you could run in tandem with tests for a bulk. Would it be my premier choice? Maybe not. That's why I'm kind of okay putting it in B tier. I certainly wouldn't run a lot of it, but I think for what it does, it's really solid at it. So yeah, I think B tier is fine. You could potentially call it C tier, but one of the things he doesn't mention is the estrogen management. I don't think it downregulates estrogen directly, but I think one of its metabolites basically limits the ability of estrogen to bind to the receptor, and I think that's one of the ways that it tends to basically help manage estrogen on cycle. It does seem like I think some of the anxiety is probably from the downregulation of estrogen. I think as long as you manage it, you're probably okay. But it is a testosterone-based derivative, so maybe it does have some signaling to like the fight or flight and whatnot. That could be possible.
Will it make you run faster?
God, I wish. I only run if somebody chases me, Ronick. Right, what do we got next? Oh, snap. We're talking Superdrol. Superdrol is wild, okay? This is essentially oral primobolan that, after being 17 alpha alkylated, becomes stupid potent and is one of the most powerful yet hepatotoxic compounds that's ever been invented. And you could buy it at GNC. This was a...
Yep. Back when I started lifting, you could actually buy Superdrol at GNC. I didn't try it at the time, and I definitely regret not doing that. That would have been interesting. Like, obviously, it comes with its own test suppression. By the way, just going back to everything here, both for turinabol and EQ, I'm putting it where they are with the understanding that you're running a testosterone base. You should not run either of these solo. That's a tremendously bad idea. And really, for all other compounds going forward, I will be grading them as if they have a testosterone base. You should not be taking any of these without testosterone.
Originally developed, I believe it was back in the 40s, and it was then consigned to the depths of history as just another interesting compound that was invented and never really found a place in the commercial marketplace, but then was rediscovered and introduced as a freaking supplement and sold to high schoolers alongside creatine back in the early 2000s. So one of the interesting benefits of Superdrol is that it can add a lot of size in a relatively short period of time and generally yields a very dry or grainy look compared to some other compounds, again, harkening back to its roots as basically oral primobolan. But the problem with Superdrol is that it is so freaking hepatotoxic that there have been multiple case reports of guys actually going into liver failure. So, not just turning, yellow or getting yellow eyes, but, full-on hepatic fulminant liver failure. Needing to
get your damn blood checked. You like, look, in general, you have no excuse for, like, going into liver failure as long as you're, like, monitoring your liver markers, or you're looking at ALT, LST, GGT. As long as you're doing that, the risk of this is pretty low. But, when the check engine light comes on, you need to stop taking these compounds.
To go on the liver transplant list. Like, this stuff will kill you if you are not careful. So I think that as epic as its history is, being a compound that you could buy at GNC in the early 2000s, I just have to say, because of the risk, Superdrol, this is a C. I would almost say, actually, yeah, it's a C tier compound. All right, this is not something that I can imagine fitting into almost any modern cycle because there are so many other safer options.
And I kind of agree. Is Superdrol a great compound to drive strength? Yes. I think there's some water retention associated with it as well, which makes it a little bit suboptimal for what we're trying. Like, if you're a ballistic climber, I could make a case for Superdrol. I wouldn't, but I could. Would it make sense for, like, sport or lead? No. Like, it's really hard to justify compounds like this when safer options exist. He's putting it in C tier. I don't know. It's between C or D for me. I'm going to put it in C because you could run it acutely. Like, if you were just going to run this for 1 or 2 weeks, could maybe even justify putting it in B. But, like, in that scenario, you're kind of asking yourself, is the strength gains that I get from this meaningfully better than turinabol or anavar at a lower risk? And I think they're mostly interchangeable, so I'm just going to leave it at C.
To get to that same final look, although it may take a little bit more time. All right, next on the list, we've got, oh baby, nandrolone decanoate. So nandrolone decanoate, aka decadurabolin, was actually not the first form of nandrolone to hit the market. First form was nandrolone phenylpropionate, but nandrolone decanoate became the favorite simply because it is a longer ester and so it could be dosed less frequently.
So yeah, we just finished the Deca deep dive. We know that it's one of the most potent in terms of collagen synthesis. Oh damn, now that I forgot about this, EQ actually has a lot of pro-collagen, pro-collagen properties as well. I haven't seen any research on how the collagen depositions look within the tendon, but I would imagine it's similar to nandrolone. But we know that nandrolone has huge collagen upregulation, both in the synovial fluid, which folks really like for like better joint lubrication, but also in the tendons as well. So you guys know how I feel about it. You know that I think it's a little bit too anabolic for our purposes. Even with the water retention, in my opinion, it is simply too anabolic for climbers to use. The other side of it is it's a 19-nor, meaning you're going to get some pretty gnarly neurotoxicity. And yes, while you get neurotoxicity from basically all steroids, 19-nors are particularly brutal. So, yeah, keep that in mind.
The original indication for nandrolone, because it was on the market as a medication, was for anemia. And so for patients that have certain medical conditions, in particular chronic kidney disease or end-stage renal disease where they're actually on dialysis, your kidneys are responsible for more than just filtering your blood. They're actually responsible for making the compound erythropoietin that stimulates your bone marrow to make more red blood cells. And so whenever that's taken out of the equation, many of those patients will become anemic and they have really low blood counts. And so obviously we know that you can dose testosterone at high levels and end up getting a response when it comes to your red blood cells, but they couldn't dose female patients with that, and even if you dose male patients with that, you've got all those nasty, weird androgenic sides. So nandrolone was developed as the prototypical 19-nor derivative of testosterone. And so it had all of these erythropoietic effects. Nandrolone doesn't have many of those androgenic side effects because nandrolone does not convert via 5-alpha reductase to a very potent DHT compound. It does go through that pathway, but the ultimate product doesn't serve to be a really strong ligand for the DHT receptor. So as a result, you really don't get a lot of that hair loss and the more...
True, you don't get a lot of hair loss on nandrolone. Also, you could actually use it, or nandrolone also works really well off of estrogen. So it's not unreasonable to run nandrolone alongside estrogen and use that as the driver. In general, most people obviously use testosterone. Your testosterone is going to up your estrogen, which in turn is going to get used by the nandrolone which in turn is going to be used by the nandrolone and increase the impacts of it. But folks that run a lot of test and DECA together have run into some hair loss. So if you were really worried about the hair safety, you could just run nandrolone with a little bit of estrogen and do it that way. Not that I think you should, especially as a rock climber, but realistically, that's a thing you could do.
Or androgenic side effects that are typically associated with steroids. So that's what was invented. Now, from a performance enhancement standpoint, nandrolone has been estimated to be 20 times more myogenic than testosterone if you look at those old assay studies, in rats. And, again, how much does that really mean? But if you talk to anyone who has compared a cycle of just testosterone to nandrolone, if they're a responder to it, this stuff hits like a freight train. It is pretty darn potent.
Yeah.
The drawback is, though, is that because it is not very androgenic, it's more myogenic. If you are running a pure nandrolone cycle or a nandrolone dominant cycle, it becomes really likely that you could develop sexual dysfunction, also known as DECA. This is a real phenomenon where essentially you've got this compound we hypothesize, binding to your testosterone receptor, to the androgen receptor, and it's just not, stimulating any androgenicity down in the corpus cavernosum, and so you're not getting any nitric oxide release that you need in order to dilate, that penile artery and
Not only that, a lot of folks that have talked about running DECA in the past have also mentioned that, they also have some changes in sexual preference. I've seen some stories on Reddit where some folks go from taking DECA and are suddenly into thick ladies. In some cases, particularly on Tren, another famous 19-nor, they're more into maybe they're in a pre-op, maybe they're in a post-op, and I don't kink shame, but it's really wild for folks to pin something and then completely change their sexual preferences. And yeah, it definitely, if you're with a partner or just starting to date someone and suddenly your dick doesn't work, that could also lead to some problems in the rest of your life, which isn't really worth it for a compound that I think is just too anabolic for climbers.
Engorge the corpora and get an erection. So it's become very common to run testosterone as a base with nandrolone, and something that's become almost kind of bog standard in most TRT clinics that prescribe nandrolone, because many do, is to do that standard half a dose of nandrolone per testosterone. So if you're on 200 mgs of testosterone, you'll do 100 mgs of DECA. But in reality, patients may be able to tolerate a different ratio than that. But you just have to. It's different for every single patient. There's not
that's literally the ratio that I ran: 100 milligrams of DECA to 200 milligrams of test.
One hard set thing. And one thing that I particularly love about nandrolone is this was the first compound that I wrote a research paper on. So I wrote, I believe even still to date, the first and only paper talking about the effect of nandrolone on joint pain, because that's something that's been seen for a long time. Guys get on DECA and they say that it helps with their joints and helps joints.
And I reviewed that study. I actually think that was mentioned in my DECA deep dive.
So we did a retrospective study on that when I was in fellowship, and I am still super proud of that. So just because I published on it, for that reason alone, nandrolone decanoate DECA is S tier. All right, next on the list.
Wrong, it's C tier, and I can't be convinced otherwise. But still dope paper. Obviously, check out Dr. Alex's channel. Check out Dr. Alex's research paper. I cannot, in good faith, call DECA an S tier compound. That is absolutely BANANAS.
Nandrolone phenylpropionate, aka NPP. NPP, this is a fascinating compound. It was the first form of nandrolone to come out, as we had mentioned earlier, and
It's a shorter ester than Deca. Deca is like 7 to 14-day ester. I think NPP is like 3. It's not a great ester. If for no other reason than it's just shorter, I guess I could call it like a high C, but I still wouldn't run this compound again.
I don't know, test NPP and T-ball, that would probably be a much drier and more tolerable version of that stack. And so arguably we should say that NPP is S tier, but you know what? I don't believe that, because I prefer Deca, because I wrote a paper on Deca and I have not written a paper on NPP. So for that, NPP gets busted down to B tier, because it's really just copying the one that I prefer. And it's okay. This is my list. This is not yours. If you disagree with me, comment in the section down below. Next one, Winstraw, aka Winnie.
All right, so getting into an oral that I've talked literally the most shit about. Let's go.
I love Winstraw because it is one of the most OG oral steroids that came out of the East German bloc during the years of the Cold War, and it is extremely potent. And I also think that for a long time this was the most popular steroid for high schoolers to try and hide from their moms, whenever they were going out for football or something, because it's very easy to take, it's orally available, so it's easy to hide your stash from your parents, and it gives this very dry, strong type of vascular look, and in addition to some pretty significant strength gains. The drawback from Winstraw is that it is really, really hard on your liver, but it's especially hard on your lipids. And so guys who will run Winstraw, if they're not being careful, they can often run it for way too long. And what happens is they tank their HDL, their LDL goes up, and you talk about having young guys, not bodybuilders, that's a totally different ball game. Those doses are just banana cakes. But if you hear about young recreational steroid users that are dropping from cardiac events, not uncommonly Winstraw's played a significant portion in that.
Because they don't do blood work and they can't handle the dyslipidemia. Obviously, there are ways to manage it. You could throw in some ezetimibe. You could raise your fish oil. You could run growth hormone. These are all things you could do to manage the dyslipidemia that comes with all oral steroids. This is not just limited to Winstraw. But the reason that I cannot stand Winstraw, and I will die on this hill, is because of its impact on collagen synthesis. So it actually messes with the lattice structure of tendons in general. It does stop once you come off the Winstraw, but also because it dries you out as well, it is associated with more injuries than most other steroids that I am aware of. And part of it is because this is happening for bodybuilders, at least, when they are cutting in general. So, they want to be dry, so they throw on Winnie, and they're already running their aromatase inhibitors, so their estrogen is nuked into the ground, and they're super calorically deficient. So they're just, everything is working against them, and then they just try a lift and something snaps. And do I think that if you had more calories, you could run Winnie for 2 to 4 weeks somewhat safely? Yeah, probably. Am I super biased against this compound? Also, yes. I wouldn't take it in the off season. I would only take it to peak. For peaking, it's probably a pretty solid oral. For off season, it's definitely a no-go for me. Let's see what Dr. Alex has to say about it.
Because this is going to be what drives plaque formation in a large portion of men. And so I really like Winstraw. I think it's effective at what it does, but the problem is that it does terrible things to your lipids. And also, it really dries out the joints. It kind of feels like you're lifting with sandpaper. And as somebody who is rapidly approaching 40 and had my 38th birthday last week, I feel old enough as is. I don't really need anything else reminding
Happy birthday, Dr. Alex.
Me that every day I'm one step closer to death. And so for that, we're going to put Winstraw in solid B tier for now.
I'm between a B and a C on this. I definitely, I think it's better than Superdraw. Yeah, I think it's better than Superdraw. I think it's better than the C tiers. Yeah, it's fine. I'm for where it categorizes, I'm fine with its placement. I think if F tier existed on this, can I make an F tier? What did I just do? Okay, that's what happens. So yeah, basically my thought is I'm fine with, given the fact that this is where everything is, I am okay putting this in B tier. I think if we had an F, I would probably throw it in C tier, but this is fine. I think that's pretty acceptable right now.
All right, moving on. Ronick, I don't even think we're halfway through this. We have so many more compounds to cover. I think we went a little bonkers on this one. Oh, wow. This is a way to go. MENT, when you want to go to the dark side of DECA, MENT is your man. So what effort? And not just because the intentionally the...
I've never used Mount. I have no intention of using Mount. Like, the idea of, like, a more reckless 19 Norse seems ridiculous, but, like, okay, that's fine.
The altered, juiced version of DECA. So what happens when you get DECA on steroids? Well, you get MENT. MENT is a little weird in that it is a 7-alpha methyl version of nandrolone, which was originally developed not for any sort of anabolic purposes. This was developed as a potential agent for male contraception. So this kind of intersects with another part of my practice, which is male fertility. You know, the honest to goodness truth is that we don't really have any good hormonal agents for controlling fertility in males. We don't have an oral male contraceptive. We don't have an injectable male contraceptive. Honestly, if you're a guy and you're trying to not knock anybody up, you're stuck with either physical barriers, so just wrapping it with a condom, or you're looking at a vasectomy, which, you know, it's great. You know, I do vasectomies, and even better than that, I do vasectomy reversals. So, you know, all you guys who you're on your 3rd and 4th wives, you know, holler at your boy. But
Oof. Yeah, so I know that they were looking into this for male contraception. I definitely think it causes gyno as well. Whatever, it'd be like that. Yeah, I guess if you're looking for a vasectomy, hit up Dr. Alex. And if you're looking for your vasectomy to get reversed, hit up Dr. Alex. That's cool. But yeah, I'm curious to hear about these anabolic effects. I think it's really uncommon to hear anyone that's like running Ment.
You know, we don't really have anything that is like an on-off switch. We've tried to develop a couple different things. There's some products on the market or coming to market potentially as like a gel that could be injected into the vas deferens and then maybe dissolved later. But again, nothing that you can get really today. So this was a valiant effort, and not just because the intent was in the right place, but because we got a really ridiculously overpowered steroid as a result. And so MENT hits like a freight train. It is much more myogenic than either DECA or NPP, and is probably on the level of Tren, although it is much more watery than Tren. This is a compound that you don't see used very commonly in bodybuilding circles, simply because there are other compounds that are, you know, much more mild and tolerable.
So intolerable, drives water retention, super anabolic. Looking at F tier right now.
Guys can use instead.
19 Nor
F tier.
F tier.
That I've absolutely seen powerlifters use to great effect, especially when they're already at the top of their weight class and they don't really care anymore. So MENT is a fascinating compound, but because it does have, you know, pretty significant sides, this is not something for general consumption. Not that any freaking steroid is for general consumption, let's be honest. But I'm gonna have to put MENT as a solid B tier right now.
Wrong. It's F tier. It's not worth the side effects. It's not worth the water retention. The strength gains aren't worth it. It's probably too anabolic. It's neurotoxic as shit. That's a hard pass from me, dog.
B tier. All right, let's keep going here. We're going to shake things up a bit. Next one. Oh, geez. Proviron. Proviron. I don't know what to do with you, Proviron. This is a compound that I have never seen anybody run on their own. I've never seen anybody run in a small stack. This is always just some additional thing that seems to be added in when someone is already running 3 to 4 grams of some bunch of other compounds and they're like going into a show.
So my understanding about Proviron is it doesn't really do anything on its own. It just makes testosterone work better. Okay, cool. Could it potentially be in a similar category as Mastron? Maybe. Am I going to try to test and run this? No.
And I don't know if this is actually providing any sort of benefit at that point. This is an extremely weakly anabolic compound. It's weaker than testosterone. It's primarily just used as a way to offset many of the side effects that, you know, can happen when you're running really large complex stacks with, you know, other compounds. But I just have no patience for it. I really don't. It is a supporting character at best. And listen, we don't mess with supporting characters around here. All right.
I do mess with supporting characters, but it's got to earn its place and it's got to be worth it as a tool. In general, I think that the only thing Proviron is good at stimulating is your wallet, and if you want to spend money on it, like YOLO, live your truth. But I have yet to meet any self-respective athlete that runs or likes this compound.
We're all stars, all right? S tier only. So I would say Proviron, this is F tier, straight F tier. This is trash, man. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put this over here. And you know what? We will never worry about it ever again. All right. All right, moving on. All right, next on the list, we've got testosterone cypionate, the OG steroid.
Do we even, like, it's S tier, right? It's bioidentical. Yeah, it's bioidentical. It drives strength. It's not super watery. You could run it solo. Like, of all the compounds, if he puts this at anything other than S tier, me and Dr. Alex have problems. Like, this compound is... It's about as perfect of a compound as
Interesting
you
story.
could run.
When I went through my fellowship training, so when you go through training as a doctor, you do residency, which is going to be just your baseline, whatever your specialty is going to be. And then if you happen to be a particular masochist, you can go on for further subspecialty training called fellowship, which is what I did. And so after 5 years of urology training, I went all the way down to Houston, Texas to do my fellowship with a guy named Dr. Larry Lipschultz. And Dr. Lipschultz is really the godfather of modern men's health. If you look at the field of male fertility, he pretty much invented that. If you look at how we perform vasectomy reversals, if you look at some of the most seminal publications on things like testosterone in patients that have prostate cancer, on how to regain fertility in men that have been exposed to testosterone, really characterizing how these compounds work with human physiology. I mean, Larry was on the cutting edge, and he's still in practice today.
Shout out to Dr. Larry.
I won't tell you how old he is because it's a forever mystery of which I am sworn to secrecy. But he still sees, I kid you not, 70-something patients a day, and it is absolutely wild. So when finishing our fellowship, me and my co-fellow for life, Dr. John Balin, shout out to John down in Clearwater, Florida, we wanted to find a gift for Larry that was like nothing else. That was something truly unique. And what we found is the first book written on testosterone for mass consumption was called The Male Hormone. It was published in 1945.
That's cool. And also, like, super cool gift. I might actually consider looking into this just because I'm fascinated about, like, the origins of pharmacology. I actually think they used, I think they actually implanted testicles into people. And that was, like, the mechanism of driving tests in the beginning.
By an author known as Paul de Cruyff. And this was wild because he talked about the potential muscle and strength benefits of testosterone. This is in 1945. Yeah. At that point, they were still isolating testosterone from bull testicles. Like injectable testosterone, that
called it
to the 50s. And this guy had already picked up on the potential anabolic effects of testosterone, literally just maybe 10-something years after it had first been isolated. So that was really cool. We found a first edition copy of that book, put it in a nice little frame, and put it up in Larry's office. And that was one of the coolest things, I think. So proud that that's still up in his office today. So testosterone cypionate, first injectable form of testosterone, first form of testosterone that was introduced to the market as a medication. This is the building block off of everything else. This is what everything else is built upon, and this is the standard, right? Test-cypionate. So test-cypionate for that reason, and we'll throw test-enanthate in there as well because they're pretty similar. This is going to have to end up being another S tier for me. S tier.
True.
Testosterone cypionate. So now we've got, oh dear God, tren.
We're going to get really specific. We're going to spend some time on tren. So sit back, relax. This is going to be wild.
So before tren became a meme, tren was actually a bull steroid. And it was something that was...
It still is a bull steroid. It's used in cattle all the time.
Was in most markets never meant for human consumption. Tren was a derivative of nandrolone. It was a 19...
By the way, human beings are running larger amounts of trenbolone than cattle, which is an insane thing to think about. I think cows are taking, I want to say 75 milligrams of tren a week, and I think that's considered like a baby dose for humans.
Nor derivative that was originally meant for bulls, and it was briefly marketed as a potential treatment option for women with hormone-sensitive breast cancer in France in the 90s.
Yep, in I want to say the 60s or 70s, and I think the dose was at about 150 milligrams a week. It might have been 150 milligrams every other week, but yeah, imagine dosing women with 150 milligrams of tren a week. Jesus, yeah, they virilized. Super bad.
1970s, I believe. Roddick, you can check me on that, but we've never seen a pharma-grade trenbolone in the United States, and
but we did in France.
This used to be like the secret of the bodybuilding world. This was something that was never really talked about in the open. Steroids really weren't talked about openly until maybe the past 20 years. Which if you look at the entire history of bodybuilding, that's relatively recently. And tren certainly was this very kind of taboo compound. But now it's become a meme, right? There are people who their entire person.
So remember what I was saying about the 19 Nors before, about 19 Nors having both neurotoxicity and changes in sexual preferences? Woo boy, tren is definitely the mother of all of those. So I think they did a study where they basically looked at folks' IQ around places where they gave tren to the cows, and the people that were drinking the water downstream from the cattle had drops of 10 IQ points just from the tren that was within the water, which is crazy. And yeah, if you want to be paranoid or be in a heightened state of vigilance and get night sweats and trouble sleeping, dude, Tren, that's your jam.
Personality is built around Tren, and they've never freaking taken it. And the reason why is because there's nothing quite like Tren. Tren hits harder than almost any other injectable compound. It's incredibly potent. It gives incredible aggression. It gives an incredible amount of strength, an incredible amount of size, and it gives this kind of dry, grainy look that is really useful for competitors that really haven't developed that sort of muscle maturity that comes from being on stage for many, many years and have.
That's super true. Tren is probably the best injectable for driving aggression and building out dryness and recomping. That doesn't mean you should take it, but like, yeah, that's what it's for.
Having what some judges will describe as old muscle. The drawback about Tren though is just everything else. Everything else is a dumpster fire. This is an absolute poison. This is toxic. I mean, honestly, like people are getting excited about like microplastics and shit, and then they're injecting this. Like, yeah, okay. Tren is one of the few injectables that has actually been linked with nephrotoxicity. So. Yeah. Most injectable steroids actually don't hurt your kidneys. We can get into that debate, more later. It is, interestingly enough, hepatotoxic, despite being injectable. It causes amyloid plaques in the brain that have been linked to Alzheimer's. Like, if you can think of a way that Tren can poison you, Tren can poison you.
Don't forget Tren cough. So if you nick a vein, people basically, like Derek from More Plates, More Dates has this really funny story where, like, he pins himself with Tren and he feels the Tren cough coming and he's just like, all right, this is going to suck. Pull the needle out of your ass. Let's just like hold onto the toilet and brace for impact. Because for 3 to 5 minutes, you're just going to have these crazy coughing fits, which sounds absolutely heinous. And then like sober, you have to look at yourself in the mirror after whatever you've just, because you did this to yourself sober. And yeah, Tren is it's pretty brutal, man. And on top of being probably the most potent anabolic on this list. So really quick, and the only way that you could leverage Tren as a rock climber, realistically, is at super low doses in a weight cut. I don't advise this, but like you could. Or you could run Tren Ace for like a week or two prior to a project and just use it to drive aggression. So you would basically use it as like an injectable pre-workout. And you would use acetate, not enanthate, because you want a faster clearance time. Should you use Tren? Fuck no, dude. I never advocate for Tren use ever. It is like the mother of all side effects. But like, it has a purpose. It's just, I think it's way more useful in bodybuilding than it is for rock climbing. You could do it, but like, why would you use this when you have other options like T-ball or Anavar?
And so this is, the compound that Sebum mentioned that he just wouldn't take later on in his career, although it bears saying that he definitely took it earlier in his career, and it may have been influential in building his physique that he then relied on, right? Because honestly, if you do a couple cycles with Tren, you're going to put an incredible amount of muscle on that a lot of people are going to try to rely on for the rest of their careers. But the problem is is it worth it? Is it really worth gambling with your health to this degree? And the truth is that I don't think so. I mean, I love playing, mad scientist with my own body chemistry as much as anybody. But, honestly,
You and me both, brother. Who doesn't love playing mad scientist with your biochem?
Oh, I kind of like my kids, and I kind of like life. And so, for me, Tren, yeah, it's a cult classic.
When he says he likes his kids and he likes his life, I assume he's talking about the neurotoxicity. I don't think I could tolerate it. Not enough to risk it. If I were younger and dumber, I'd probably run Tren, but I'm almost 42. Doesn't make sense.
At this point, it's a meme. It's incredibly potent, but this is straight F tier. This is trash. This is not.
I'd probably use it over Superdrol. I'm going to give this a C tier. Just because it's more, it is far and away the most toxic thing on this list, but it is more useful than the stuff that is above it. Again, for like a 1 to 2 week context, don't take Tren.
Not something that anybody should ever put into their bodies. It doesn't make sense. There are other options that take more time but have significantly less risk. Tren, it's an F. I'm sorry, bro. I never thought it would be such tiresome and thirsty work ranking steroids, right?
True.
All right, let's see what we've got. We have got Halo tested. I don't know, I think we finally released our short on halo testin today, Ronick, but halo testin is a really fascinating compound in that
nobody knows how it works.
It really does nothing for hypertrophy. You are not going to get bigger on halo testin. Your head might get bigger, and you might think that you're tougher and stronger than you actually are, and so you end up picking a fight with your local powerlifter over who gets the squat rack, and he turns you into a pancake.
So fun fact, before they had testosterone replacement therapy, I think John F. Kennedy, the president, had an issue with his HPTA, I think it was, and they basically gave him Halo because that was like, they didn't have TRT, so they had Halo at the time, and they thought that that would like help balance out his testosterone. And he was on Halo during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So like, imagine being that aggressive and that agitated, having to like navigate the end of the world. Like, if you run that scenario 100 times, there's probably at least like 20 to 30% of the time where the world just gets nuked. It's crazy.
But halotestin really primarily is a compound that's used for its aggression. Some people do like the physique effects that it can have. It's been known to kind of contribute more to muscle hardness and kind of a grainy look, but again, there are other options for that, here. And, really, Halo, if they talk about roid rage, if that really is a thing, halotestin is, the absolute worst offender.
Facts.
So I think Halo is an interesting compound, but as far as usefulness, I mean, not really. Halo, this is C tier for me.
Okay. Hot take. I wouldn't run it for more than a week or two. You have to be willing to, like, not punch loved ones. But, like, for an oral that drives aggression for ballistic movements, I could put this as a B. Yeah, I could put Halo B tier. What is this? Is that Winstrol? Yeah, I'd put it above Winstrol. Yeah, above Winstrol, behind EQ. I think that's super fair. That's tricky. Like, no, it's not fair. Winnie's probably above it. If for no other reason than on Winstrol, you're less likely to, like, kick a puppy, I think that you have to give it to Winstrol on this one.
This is C tier. Ronick, we're running out of room. Okay, we have too much beer here. All right. Oh man, this is one of the goats. Oxandrolone, Anavar, baby. Anavar is probably the most preem oral anabolic agent there is. It is actually not very hepatotoxic at all. It will screw with your lipids. That's okay. It's nowhere near as bad as something like Winstrol.
I actually looked into the data on this. So before they pulled it from the FDA, they were letting kids run this for like up to 3 years, which is like insane. I think they've had AIDS patients on this pretty indefinitely. I took Anavar for 9 months straight, and even at the end of it, my lipids weren't terrible. They were still like within the range.
What's really interesting about Anavar is that you can run this at pretty low doses for a significant period of time. Now, I know people, male competitors who have run it at low doses. I'm talking 2.5, 5 milligrams a day just for kind of the finishing effect that it can, convey, onto a physique and onto strength. And I mean, it's again much less toxic to run than pretty much any other oral on this list.
The biggest issue you're going to have with Anavar is that it's underdosed. Most of the time, and I did a video on this, but the underground labs pretty typically will short you on this. So assuming you're able to get pharma grade, or even if it's slightly underdosed, like you could run Anavar for a really long time and tolerate it. On top of that, it's probably the best for driving strength. It is slightly it's more anabolic molecule for molecule for testosterone, but you're not going to run it in the same doses. Like, Anavar is awesome, man. And also huge driver of collagen synthesis. It's good for tendons. There's actually a guy out of the University of Southern California right now that's testing it on tendons in rotator cuff surgeries. Like, Anavar is the GOAT.
Also really, really good at providing that sort of shredded look. One thing that I have to dispel about a myth, I'll get guys who come in here that look like they're carrying like, a frickin', weight vest around them and just fat. And they're like, yeah, bro, can you give me an Anavar script, so I can get shredded? Like, the Anavar will not get you shredded, okay?
Nope.
What gets you shredded? A freaking calorie deficit, okay? And we can talk about the
Retatrutide would be S tier if it was on this list.
GLP-1s and all of that, later on, this helps maintain muscle mass that you have already accrued while you are in a caloric deficit. And so I absolutely love Anavar. I think it's a fantastic compound. It is one that is still available for prescription here in the United States. Has to be made by a compounding pharmacy. The generic form can't get it from CVS or Walgreens anymore. There's some legal history there. But this is absolute goated S tier.
Agreed. This is a certified S tier compound. This is testosterone, right? Yeah. Testosterone is also... hold on. Oh, trenacetate. Jesus Christ. No. Trenace is... I think we said B tier. Okay. So test is S tier. Trenace is C tier. That makes sense. Cool. So yeah, in general, like my God, Anavar is the GOAT. You could run it for basically ever. Driver of collagen synthesis, drive strength, good for finger strength. Like for rock climbers, this is the perfect anabolic. Like straight up, there is nothing better. Assuming you could get it from a quality source, there is nothing, and you're getting what you're getting, and it's not like Winnie or Cialis or something like that. This is the GOAT, like hands down #1 pound for pound for rock climbing.
One of the best compounds to ever be made, Anavar, S tier.
Yep.
Now, moving on, we've got Primobolan, aka Primo. This is going to be a really potent injectable DHT derivative that is primarily used as more of a finishing compound. This is something...
Wrong. It's mostly used to add additional androgens into your stack without having to leverage more testosterone. It's also going to lower your E2. So if you have some issues getting a little, or with high estrogen, adding some Primobolan to mitigate that is a good alternative to an aromatase inhibitor.
That is going to be used during cut phases, primarily for physique purposes, to try and help guys get that really shredded, granular
People use it in bulks and cuts. People use Anavar all year round, or use Primobolan all year round.
Look to their physique. This is not something that you're ever going to see in someone who's trying to put on size. It's just not super effective for that. I've had one or two people that I know and have worked with who have used Primobolan unconventionally in those settings. If they have other, complicating factors, we can talk about that. But really, this is something that is going to be part of a stack when someone is shredding and they're in that significant caloric deficit and they're trying to maintain everything they previously gained. But Primo as a DHT derivative, it is going to be a risk to your hairline. That's something you have to keep in mind. And taking finasteride isn't going to help you, right? Because it's going to bind directly to that DHT receptor. So you're talking about having to add in like topical RU or something like that. That's actually a androgen receptor blocker if you're going to try and survive this. It's not particularly as bad for hair for most people as something like Masteron, and unfortunately, much like Anavar, this is one of the most counterfeited compounds around.
Yep. So especially since Vigorous Steve got on the campaign to say that Primobolan was his favorite anabolic after test, you can't find pharma grade, or you can't find pharmaceutical Primo anymore. It's super hard to get a hold of. And it's also faked super frequently. If you end up getting Masteron instead of Primo, I think you're probably fine. But, DHTs are probably safer than most of the other alternatives here. I'm curious where he puts it. I'm probably going to put it above Equipoise. I feel pretty comfortable putting it in A tier because it's less anabolic than Equipoise. But does something similar. The only downside to Primo is the post-injection pain and the issues to your wallet, but I feel no problem. I have to run Primo at some point. I think I'm going to like it about as much as Mass, but we'll see. But just off of literature and other folks' experience, I'll probably call it A tier.
Primobolan, this is excellent. This is an incredible compound. It is absolute S tier for me.
A tier.
Oh baby, time for oxymethylone, aka A-bombs. So oxymethylone was developed, again, for trying to increase red blood cell counts in patients, and it's very good at that. Known as Anadrol, it has quickly amassed a kind of cult-like following for the increases in strength, and not just increases in strength over the course of several weeks, but acutely. This causes some serious nervous system activation and allows people to increase their PRs, by several percentage points, 5-10% acutely with a dose of Anadrol. Now, the challenge is that it doesn't necessarily work for everyone, right? I've worked with a lot of guys who...
The other issue is that you feel like shit on Anadrol. Like, you love the way that you lift, but you'll hate the way you feel.
Have been unimpressed with what they've seen from oxymethylone, but get more of a strength boost from something like T-ball or D-ball. But the real problem is that this is really hepatotoxic. It's not as bad as something like Superdrol, if you look at the number of case reports that are out there as far as fulminant liver failure. But this is, so far to my knowledge, the only oral anabolic or any anabolic that's actually truly been linked to cancer. So there have
Growth hormone.
been case reports of hepatocellular carcinoma linked to oxymethylone use. And again, the question is, like, how much is too much? It depends on the patient, depends on the guy. There are stories of people taking, multiple 50 milligram tablets, prior to a strength competition. I've heard stories of guys taking 5, 6, 7, 8 tabs, beforehand, which
Don't do that, obviously.
absolutely blows my mind. This is a compound that is so potent that really I don't think, at least in my mind, it has much of a role as an ongoing use in, let's say, a stack, even when you're trying to put on size. This is more something that you would use occasionally, maybe before a big workout or, an untested competition, like in powerlifting. But it's a significantly potent compound, it's a risky compound, and it has only a very, very limited window of application. And so for me, oxymethylone, A-bombs, Anadrol, this is going to be C tier for me.
I think that I would probably run this over halo testing, but probably behind Winnie. I like orals that drive strength. I think anything that is good for ballistic movement, like dynos, has a place. By the way, for everything B tier and below, I would not run as a sport climber. I'd really, even for B tier, this is really just I need to dyno super hard. I need to make a big move and clamp down super hard. These are not endurance drugs. These are not stamina drugs. These are just brute force, give me all the power I need in this one move drugs. And that's kind of the way that I think about them. Really, anything in the A tier you could potentially use to just improve your strength, and I might understand using Primo or Turinabol as a sport climber if the routes aren't super long. Anavar is the GOAT. Test is best. But yeah, I think I feel pretty comfortable putting Anadrol in B tier. If we expanded the list, I'd probably call it C tier. But Anadrol would have its place, even though I wouldn't take it over anything that would, from just considering the safety profile, anything ranked above it, I'd probably take it before Anadrol.
I need to clarify. C tier is something that you would take any significant amount, but this is definitely going to be like your S tier pre-workout. This is going to hit harder than anything that you can find for sale on TikTok, but definitely not something that I would take on an ongoing basis. So
if you wanted to use it for peaking, he says it's S tier. That's assuming that you tolerate it. Yeah, maybe. It depends on the water retention that it gives you too. You're definitely, if you try it 3 or 4 times just to see how you climb on it, that's a thing you could do. But I feel pretty comfortable putting it in B tier, even with all of the other information provided.
There you go. I'll put a little caveat there. So finally, I think our protein box is getting a little bit lighter here as we work to our very end. Let's see. I think this is it, Ronick. We don't have anything left. So there you go. Gorilla Mind. We just ran out of your bars, so holler at your boy, right? Got to keep my team going during a busy clinic. So, all right. This is good. All right, growth hormone. So we've been talking, this entire time about different oral and injectable androgens with a brief little sideline to MK as a ghrelin agonist. But the truth is that what's important to putting on size is not just muscle hypertrophy, but also muscle hyperplasia. So the majority of size that you will accumulate while on androgens, while working out in the gym, even as a natural, is mostly muscle hypertrophy, which is enlargement of the individual muscle cells. But when you're really trying to push things, you're trying to go even farther, you look for hyperplasia, which is actually the development of new muscle cells. And growth hormone is one of the few things that can actually achieve that. And
I know that's the hypothesis. I don't know if this is true. If he says it, I'll take his word for it. But really one of the things that GH does really well is it drives IGF-1, which helps with nutrient absorption.
And so it can happen, through the growth hormone that you will secrete naturally, okay? Or you can straight up pen it. As it became, available in, the late 80s, early 90s. It was available before then, not in a recombinant form, but actually in a form from cadavers. But people actually got mad cow disease from that in Great Britain. It was a whole thing. So things did not really come onto the scene in the world of bodybuilding, until the recombinant version hit the market. And so growth hormone is incredibly, incredibly potent. But the challenge with growth hormone is
it's super expensive.
That it's not as easy as just pinning your test and just white knuckling it through your cycle. Growth hormone requires a strategy, because whenever you start to dose growth hormone, you're going to have changes in insulin sensitivity, which can put you at risk for developing things like diabetes.
And you could pretty easily manage this by limiting your carbohydrates. You could do that with retatrutide. By the way, one of the other things that's cool about growth hormone is it actually will help with the dyslipidemia. It can raise your HDL and lower your LDL. So that means it pairs even better with Anavar like peanut butter and jelly. But yeah, you do have to watch out for the insulin sensitivity.
Problem. There's issues when it comes to accumulating fluid in joint spaces, and so athletes will.
That the edema he's mentioning is really the crux of it. The only reason I wouldn't make this an S tier compound, even though nothing drives collagen synthesis better than growth hormone, is the edema. Getting the numbness in the fingers, having trouble closing the fingers. You can, I could do block pulls on it, but it's really hard to board climb for me when I'm on growth hormone, especially as I start escalating the doses. On 1.5 to 2 IUs of growth hormone, I could do everything, and it's pretty tolerable for me. But when I'm really trying to push the doses, the edema sucks real bad.
Often develop carpal tunnel, and so they will be in the gym working out, and they'll just drop their dumbbells because they can't hold on. They actually will have a temporary paralysis or a palsy of a nerve in their wrist because they've got so much fluid in the joint space. And if we're talking about what sort of doses cause that, I've seen that on as little as 3 and 4 IUs a day, just depending on how sensitive the person is to it. And so growth hormone often has to be paired due to issues with insulin sensitivity with insulin itself. That gets a whole lot more complicated if we're talking about risk. That is something that will take.
We're not going to pair this with insulin. That's a whole other animal.
You out if you don't manage exceedingly closely. Using insulin as an anabolic agent is playing with fire, but peanut butter and jelly, it tends to follow with growth hormone administration for most athletes.
Dude, I didn't even consider that he was going to use the peanut butter and jelly analogy. Jesus Christ. I didn't pre-watch this, actually.
But again, growth hormone can allow for hyperplasia, and there's been a lot of suspicion about whether or not growth hormone was responsible for palumboism, the enlarged bellies that we started to.
It's really the carbohydrates and the insulin that's really what caused the bellies.
See in the 80s Mass Monster phase, and Dave Palumbo's been interviewed himself on this. He's one of the first guys to really experiment with growth hormone and with insulin. It's not exactly clear if that's exactly what does it, but due to the complexities involved in this, although I love growth hormone as a compound, and I think it's really interesting as an option for hypertrophy beyond really truthfully competitive bodybuilders or very high level strength athletes, powerlifters, I would say growth hormone, if we're looking at it just as a purely anabolic agent, this is going to be probably B tier for most recreational.
So I'm going to put this in A tier, and I'll tell you why. I think it's definitely A tier at driving tendon strength. There's no other compound that does this to the same extent. It helps with bone mineral density. It helps with tendon integrity. It's not going to drive the tendon strength just automatically, but if you pair it with proper stimulus, it will. But what it will do, and this is kind of the crux of it, is if you can tolerate it, you can get some really incredible super physiological gains. You can also up the doses like crazy and get thicker hands. If you are trying to do something like off-width climb, you could definitely fist max. I'm actually going to do a non-unhinged fist maxing video later on in the week probably. But yeah, growth hormone is pretty awesome, and I definitely think that it should be leaned on more. I think at 1.5 to 3 IUs, as much as you can tolerate, I think that it's probably the best thing at driving tendon integrity and tendon strength. I think if you pair that with Anavar and Test, that's really all you need. You can optionally throw in a Primo or a Mast if you want to. But yeah, I definitely, by the way, Masteron isn't on this list, but I would put Masteron at A tier as well. I would probably put it right ahead of Primabol and maybe even ahead of Turinabol. But yeah, actually, hold on a second. Let's do that. Masteron. Images. Yay. And let's put you in A tier. So yeah, I definitely think that if I had to put out the list as it is right now, I would put Anavar and Test in S tier, followed by GH, Mast, Turinabol, and Primobolan in A. And I think that's honestly all you'd ever need. All of these compounds are pretty damn safe, minus the Turinabol. You could absolutely experiment if you wanted to with your EQ, with your Anadrol, with your Halo testing, with your Winnie, although I would probably advise against it. Like, the level of, like, the toxicity jump between A to B is pretty noticeable outside of, like, EQ. And, you know, you could run anything in the C or D tier just for science, but, like, I wouldn't. It's not good. Like, like, in general, sure, these tools are effective, but why would you use them when, like, better tools exist? Is kind of the way that I would look at that. But, yeah, obviously, special thanks to Dr. Alex Tatum for letting me react to his video. That was super awesome. I appreciate that, dude. The other part, don't forget to like, subscribe, check out his video. I know I'm not going to drive a lot of traffic to it, but I'm still really grateful that he gave me the opportunity to react to it. That's super rad. But yeah, definitely check him out. I'm probably going to bounce out now. So I have to find out if one of my friends made the Paralympic or the paraclimbing competition in Seoul. Let's take a look at that really quick. Oh, did this already happen? I thought it was supposed to be at a...
We would like to ask for your attention.
To prevent ground fault in the early part of the route.
Yes, exactly. That top rope system designed specifically for our para athletes. There is a point, but right, he could be in trouble. He's a lower crux here. These two pinches. Wow. Well, there we go. The stadium.
Yes.
That time, of course, the climbers just out there doing their best. He's about to come on. He's an.
Dude, they're blind. That's so epic.
Yeah, it's confident stuff from both of them. Lynn.
Let's see.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the award ceremony for the IFSC Paraclimbing World Championship Seoul 2025.
I don't think Isabel made the finals, so that sucks. I think it's actually also happening in like an hour or two. So yeah, my friend Isabel, she's in Seoul right now. She's awesome. She is missing one of her hands, and she climbs like an absolute savage. And yeah, definitely cheering her on, giving her all of the amazing food recommendations in Seoul to hopefully bring home some gold for America. But like, yeah, obviously gonna cheer for my homie. Definitely a legend. She trains super hard. She's an absolute savage. But yeah, guys, thanks for sticking around. I really appreciate it. Again, thanks to Dr. Alex for letting me react. Plenty of new content coming in. By the way, I've taken a couple weeks off the gym. I'm finally relaxed, feeling loose, feeling good, which is awesome. I'm going to go ahead and get back in the gym probably tomorrow. It's going to be fun. There'll be some more training footage. But yeah, as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I